like to go back into the chapter on MJ12 and just, I mean, again, I don't want to give too much away, but a film.
No, I don't care about that.
Okay, well, there's a film shown on the TV, and it's of a very good quality film of a flying craft, and then another craft comes up next to it, and this is regarded as a security leak, and that's why MJ12 called this meeting. And I just wondered if this, this Exploring the Unknown program that's mentioned in the film clip, was that just a scenario that you came up with, or was it based on a real event where something was leaked in a TV documentary and you'd heard that, people had got, all excited about this or upset? Was there any, was that based on a real event, or?
There was two scenarios. One was for my group, thinking what would happen if we could actually get some pictures.
Right.
Pleasant pictures of the triangle, and what if it was released to TV? Would anybody show it, or would everybody say, no, it's been phonied up or whatever? I mean, this is back before they had Photoshop. In fact, it was
digital imaging was very, rudimentary then. You couldn't really do much on a computer with images, on your desktop.
Well, even back then, the NSA was airbrushing film, so I mean, there wasn't computer technology
for them,
except maybe in the government at certain high levels. But we talked about that, and then I worked it in the book because a friend of mine that I've always called Dale, we met in 67 or 68. I've known him since the Vietnam conflict. And I'd periodically send updates to the book to my 5 friends. And then Dale got really interested in it. So I sent him a corrected copy that one of my friends had sent back. I made the corrections, and I had this extra copy, so I mailed it to him. And it was a draft towards the final draft. And he read it and found it very interesting and started talking to his dad, which I didn't know at the time, but had been career NSA.
Mm.
And Dale says, well, I have a couple of documents, which I later found out that his dad gave it to him. And he says there's some stuff blackened out, some names and dates blackened out. He says, but I'll send them to you under the understanding that you never reveal where you got them. I said, okay, I can live with that. So he sent me a couple of documents, and the MJ12 documents in question, 2 of them are Majestic 12. I had never heard of Majestic 12. I had no clue. One of them was the MJ12 charter signed by proxy by Reagan, which when you read it, you realize that somebody signed it for Reagan. In other words, whether you want to call it the secret government or the Bilderbergers or
whoever it was. Yeah, I mean, these are reproduced in the presentation, the 1998 one. You show them on the screen, and also they're reproduced in the book, so people can.
Yes.
And I'll try and put them in the video as well. So and I mean, it's really interesting because you later found out that this corroborated with some of the documents that had been released to other people. They had similar, or even the same document. I think yes,
in fact, I believe it was Brad Steiger, Jamie Shandera, Stanton Friedman. There are a group of people that released some of the first MJ12 documents long before I got my documents. And Dr. Woods, has an archive of all the MJ12 documents and goes in great detail trying to verify them and which ones are credible and which ones aren't. But in one of the documents, I believe it was signed by President Truman, which is also in the book. It's not a document I received. It had already been out there.
Yeah.
Brad sent me a copy of that because I kept telling Brad over the phone. I had to read it to him, and it was quite long to be reading over the phone. And he said, did you say attachment D? And I said, yes, attachment D. It deals with an alien autopsy. He said, well, that's mentioned in the Truman document. It says attachment D in the Truman document. It's already been verified as being true. So then Brad got really excited, and he's trying to explain to me everything he knows about Majestic 12. And I said, what are we going to do with it? I said, it doesn't fit the story. And he said, yeah, it does. He says, you know, we can write how these people are talking about these documents and just put them in the damn story so people can read it.
Right.
The MJ12 charter and the autopsy, and then have them discuss it a little bit, but at least the public will get a chance to look at what the documents say. Now, for the reason of telling a story, Brad knew who all the people were on the Truman document, like Dr. Detlef Bronk and all the other people. He said, well, this name has to be this name that's like that. He said, this name has to be that name. So there's a couple of names we plugged in. I threw his advice because he was the expert on the subject. Because you don't want to put a document with a bunch of blanked out stuff in a fiction story because people are going to go like, what? Because if people are really looking at the document in the story, it's not going to be blacking out.
Yeah, that's right. And then, again, it would be interesting to talk more about those, but, you know, people can look at them. But I did have a quote from the book which I wanted to just read because I thought it was a really good observation. And he says, one of the people in the meeting, General Stewart, says in the MJ12 meeting, General Stewart also rose to the challenge. I'll fax our folks within the civilian UFO groups to start spreading the rumour that Blake Webster, who's one of the characters in the book, is a CIA agent. They love to spread that shit about each other. They're always denouncing each other in those groups. And that's exactly what happens. You know, this is what I've seen and encountered. That they'll you know, you get all these talk about them being disinfo agents, and so any good information that comes out is coming out into that environment of basically mudslinging or shit throwing, whatever you want to call it.
No,
so
absolutely.
That helps the cover up.
I think some people have spent whole careers trying to debunk me. I've been accused of fabricating hundreds of documents, government documents, which is a felony, by the way, and I'd lose my pension and disability, you know, if I was caught doing one of them. So I'm not that stupid. I'm actually quite smart in certain areas.
You could say.
I've had people call me disinformation agent, accuse me of being an NSA agent, or working for some secret government group. For example, you know, I've said people wanted to get the story out there, and I've also said the government allowed me to get the story out there, and then they turn it around and they go like, oh, you're a disinformation agent putting out bullshit for the government. And I said, no. I said, I'm an information agent.
Yeah.
I said, I knew exactly what I could get away with, and the government let me do it. Because there's a large faction of the government and the military that does want the truth out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. I've heard other people saying the same thing. And then just another little question on the Reagan Charter, which I think I'd had this question, but then it's answered from working through previous material or other material that I've got from you. Yeah, the Reagan Charter, it says Mars Jupiter 12 at the top, doesn't it? The Mars Jupiter 12 committee, and I think you said in another interview that Mars Jupiter 12 bit that had come from Brad Steiger, because I don't know what it said on your document instead of Mars Jupiter. Did you say MJ12 on your document, and then Brad thought it was Mars Jupiter? If you could explain that part.
Well, it's kind of perplexing, actually. I have the documents, and then they weren't original documents. They were copies, obviously.
Yeah.
And they were retyped. And when I was talking to Dale, he says, well, these documents are all marked top secret. MJ12. Now, I don't know if the Mars Jupiter came from Dale or his father or Brad.
Right.
I don't remember, because I destroyed, before I went public, I destroyed everything I had that might be a classified document where they could arrest me for it.
Yeah.
So obviously I don't have the originals, and I'm actually still glad I don't. But, I mean, I've heard Majestic 12, I've heard, Majestic Jehovah.
Right.
And that's where we ended up calling the aliens Jexava, which is basically Jehovah with a X in it.
I was going to ask you that as well. Yeah. So that's interesting.
And then there's other people like Sitchin, who's written about the 12th planet, and there's possibly there was a planet between Mars and Jupiter, and it exploded, and that's where the aliens came from originally, and that's why they use Mars, Jupiter. So, I mean, there's no evidence to explain exactly why the government chose MJ, R12, or Majestic 12. Now, a lot of people say the 12 stands for 12 people.
Yeah.
The 12 people on the secret government that Eisenhower warned of. Other people say it has to do with the 12th planet that Sitchin wrote about.
Yeah, we don't really know.
So there's a lot of speculation in there. However, having worked in with contracts, statement of work, specifications, proposals, and been recognized government ease or government speak, when I read that, and I reread it several times because I didn't know what the hell I was looking at, because I knew nothing about Majestic 12. When I read it, remember thinking to myself, this is exactly how the government would have written this. Exactly. It's covered all the bases. It's well thought out. So if it's not the Majestic 12 Charter, if there is a Majestic 12 Charter, it's going to be quite similar, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, obviously with the circles that you've moved in and the sorts of documents you've been reading for all those years, you're going to know from reading it, the vocabulary, the style, even the formatting perhaps, you're going to know that it looks, everything points to it being authentic, an authentic document. But again, people can study those documents for themselves, and they are available and worthy of some good study, I think.
Well, one of the, I don't know if it's ironic or what you'd call it, but when I was at Laughlin, Dr. Woods, who spent his whole career working for McDonnell Douglas and actually studied UFO propulsion system and has admitted to it, has great credibility. Some of the best credibility.
Some of his documents were leaked to me personally. I got some of his documents from the 1960s, and I could tell you a story behind that, because apparently what happened was somebody moved into a house which was owned by one of Bob Wood's associates and found some documents in a barn, and they thought, oh, these look quite interesting. And then they sold them on eBay for $31, and the person who bought them contacted Grant Cameron, and Grant contacted me. Grant's in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and we published them. So we've got 200 pages of Douglas aircraft documents, some of which were written by Bob Wood, and they're on my website, and they've been on my website for about 5 years. So yeah, we've got the documents that he and others wrote about their investigations into the propulsion systems. There's even a 60-page presentation that he gave to somebody, and that's all in there. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, is it Robert Woods?
Bob Wood with no S.
Yes, he has a lot of videos on YouTube. I've watched quite a few of them, but he's one of those people that I give great credibility to. I don't think he's disinformation in any way, but his son was at the IUFOC, and I had the documents, and I said, I hear your father's investigating Majestic 12 documents. He said, yeah, or yes, or whatever. And I said, well, I've got a couple of documents here that one's a MJ12 charter and the other is attachment D, the alien autopsy. And I said, would you like them? And he says, not particularly. And I said, well, I think it might be relevant. And he said, no. And he said, excuse me, I've got somebody waiting for me. Have a good day. Walk off. And it almost felt like he was being rude, or maybe he just thought I was some crazy guy or something. I don't have a clue.
It's strange. I mean, you would have thought that he would have contacted you afterwards, even if he hadn't known who you were on the day. You would have thought that he would have contacted you since to kind of apologise, or that is quite unusual.
Well, maybe it's just the simple fact that they wanted something that looked like an original document, and I didn't have the original document.
Maybe.
I mean, I personally don't know, but you'd think over the years that Dr. Wood would have called me up and go like, hey, how did you get this information?
He would, and it's very peculiar how these things work sometimes. And certainly I'll say that, when I first heard about what you'd said, I didn't know that you'd also, I think it was only when you'd kindly directed me to a copy of Alien Rapture and I started reading through it, it was only then that I realised that you'd actually, you'd also spoken about the MJ12 documents, because I didn't even know that you'd actually spoken. I'd mainly come across your work because of the TR3B and the Flying Triangle and the associated technology. I hadn't realised that up until reading Alien Rapture that you'd even got the documents through a friend. So it was quite a surprise to me, actually, even though I didn't say so earlier on. Okay.
Well, one of the interesting things was being new to the publishing world and thinking I was never going to get an agent, because I'd contacted at least 100 and sent them the first 3 chapters, a synopsis, cover letter, the whole 9 yards. Every year I would take a copy of the book and I'd file a copyright, send it to the copyright office, file a copyright on it. And the first few times I did it, it was called The Abductors, as I've stated before.
Mm-hmm.
So I can actually prove that I wrote about the geo organ and the removable eye lenses that Colonel Corso talked about, and even the, whether you call it a remake or a fakes, alien autopsy film by Santilli. I was the first one to actually have proofs that I talked about that before anybody else.
Anybody else? Yeah, that was because that was around about 1994, wasn't it? That you'd got that document.
Yes.
Which was 2 years before the Santilli film, sort of made all those waves around the world.